So I actually had two near-death experiences. The first one was in the ER, and I was pregnant with my third child. I had two boys already that were 6 and 3.5. And well, the birth itself is kind of traumatic. So I was on in the unit in the hospital and contracting about 3 minutes apart, and we had a 7.4 earthquake. Back then it said 7.4. Now it's been downgraded to a 7.3. It was a lander's quake. It was situated in the desert, so that's why there wasn't a lot of damage. But I'm on the birthing table, contracting 3 minutes apart, and everything started shaking. We lost the power in the hospital. And it was one of those moments in my life when I thought I was going to die. So a lot of us have had these experiences. We're almost in a car accident and life sort of flashes before our eyes. And everybody was leaning over me to hold on to me because I would literally have flown off the table. And you know, in the hospital, they have all these instruments on the little metal trays. They were levitating and just bouncing up and down on the trays. So I'm thinking, this is it. I never thought I was going to die this way. We're going to be buried in rubble. The ceiling tiles are going to cave in. But miraculously, they didn't. And this hospital was built on rollers. It was a new hospital, so it just rolled back and forth. And there were these windows from, floor to ceiling. And I'm like, oh God, they're just going to cave in any moment. So the earthquake stopped, but so did my labor. So it was one of those moments when you're fearing for your life. And if you're giving birth and the tiger is going to come and eat you, then you're going to stop that labor and get yourself to safety, and then you will give birth. And so that's exactly what happened. And eventually my labor started back up about 25 minutes later. I gave birth to my daughter, and the second earthquake hit, which was a 7.2. And then I finally got to hold the baby, and they gave me the baby, and I'm just yelling to my husband, take the baby, take the baby. And I was in excruciating pain. So I'm like arching backwards on this table. And all the nurses came and the midwives, and they started, massaging my uterus, and all these blood clots came out. And we had lost all the power in the whole hospital. So we were running on a generator. So we had the light of like a night light in this birthing unit. So they put me on an IV drip to contract the uterus, and I stayed an extra day in the hospital. And then they said, all right, well, it seems like the bleeding has stopped, so we're going to send you on your way. And that was it. And we were still having aftershocks, like just nonstop. I'm lying in the hospital and the whole place is just shaking. So they sent me home, and then 10 days later, I started hemorrhaging, and my friends were having a party for me in the park because I had a girl and I had two boys before, and everybody was so excited. We're going to give you all the girly things. So I get to the park and I go to use the restroom, and this enormous blood clot comes out. I remember we're talking the size of a man's large fist. So I tell my friend, I said, something is really wrong. I got to go right now. Put the kids back in the car, drove home, which was like a block away. And my parents were visiting from Sweden to help with the kids and the birth and all that. So they called my husband. My husband comes home, and we head to the hospital. I get to the ER, and they come in, they do a manual inspection, and they say, well, doesn't seem like it's much bleeding going on right now. So it could have been a second lining, or it could have been something like that. So we're just going to send you on your way. No lab work, no ultrasound, nothing. Just that's it. Second lining, off you go. And this was in 1992. So they sent me home. The next evening, same thing happens again. Another large blood clot. But it's pretty late. It's probably 9:30 in the evening. So my husband calls the hospital, and I'm just yelling, I'm not going back. It's pointless. I'm not bleeding. They're not going to do anything. So it was decided that I should see the doctor where we lived at the time, which was Huntington Beach, California. So the next morning, Friday morning, 10 a.m., I go see the doctor. He does the same thing. Visual inspection, says, well, there isn't much bleeding going on, and then sends me on my way. And then that afternoon, late afternoon, I hemorrhage again, another large blood clot, and we go back to the ER. So here I am in the ER, and they do a visual inspection, and they say, well, there isn't much bleeding going on right now. And they leave me on this table in the ER, close the door. I didn't have a bell to ring, so I'm just lying there. So I'm thinking, well, it must not be that, it must not be that urgent because they're just leaving me here. There's no tests, nothing. So I'm lying on this table, and eventually I start hemorrhaging again. So at this moment, this nurse comes to check on me, and this is divine interference, because if she hadn't come at that moment to check on me, I probably wouldn't be here today. So I hemorrhage again. So there's all this blood on the table where I'm lying, and all the papers have been soiled. And she opens the door to check on me, and I just see this, face of horror. Her jaw is dropping to the floor, like, oh my gosh, like, you're bleeding. And I can hear the call on the loudspeaker, OBGYN, stat to the ER. OBGYN, stat to the ER. And she quickly cleans up the mess, probably because she didn't want to look bad, like they had just left me there. So she cleans it up, puts it in a wastebasket, and within 30 seconds, this middle-aged physician comes running full speed. I mean, it's like a movie, full speed into my unit with a younger physician in tow. And he quickly says, how much have you been bleeding? When did it start? And he looks at the papers in the wastebasket. So he gets an understanding, because I'm telling him, well, I bled Wednesday, I bled Thursday, I bled earlier today, and now I'm bleeding again. So I'd already hemorrhaged 4 times, right? So he says, all right, we're going to take a look, push me down on the table. And as he's doing a visual inspection, another one of those large blood clots comes out. And this is what was the tipping point. So I'm trying to sit up and tell this doctor, I don't feel too good. But he understood at this point, because I've been bleeding for 2 days now, this is my 3rd day. So he just pushes me down on the table. And at this point, I can't keep my eyes open. So my eyes are closed, and I can hear all the people coming into the room. And they're tipping the table. So my head is going towards the floor. My feet are going towards the ceiling, because they're trying to keep the blood in my brain and my heart. So, and as they do this, they put a blood pressure cuff on my right arm. They try to place the IV on my left. And at this point, I just feel like I jumped out of an airplane without a parachute. I just feel like I'm falling through the air. And that's probably my blood pressure is just crashing at this point. And as I'm lying on this table, I'm thinking, what's taking this nurse so long? Why can't she get that IV in? My eyes are closed, but I'm still functioning. But now I understand that, you go into shock, your blood vessels contract. It's very difficult to place an IV, which is why they place an IV when you go to the ER, right? To have access to the veins so they can inject medications. So here I am on this table and feeling like I'm just falling through free air. And the nurse on my right that's coding my blood pressure yells out, 50/15, hurry. And it was shortly after that I knew that I was dying. But that feeling of knowing that you're dying is very different from the experience I had when I gave birth, when I thought I was going to die. Because this time I knew I was dying. So here I am on this table. The atheist that I was did not believe in anything. I was born and raised in Sweden and confirmed when I was 14 as Lutheran. But I did not believe in the afterlife, the spirit world, religion, angels, you name it. I was a complete scientist, very materialistic worldview. And so here I am on this table. So what do? I pray to God to save my life, because that's the only thing that's left. So I'm thinking, if there is anything out there, please save me. And I say, if there's anything out there, please save me. My children need a mother. I have 3 children under the age of 6, and they need a mother. I'm thinking my husband's never going to be able to do this. So he was the true mother instinct. And shortly after that, after I say this prayer, I just get pulled out of my body. So now all of a sudden I find myself floating above my body. But in this state, you have the unconditional love and peace, which, is always present, but my second near-death experience is very different. But in this state, I knew there was no time on the other side. It was as if I had access to past, present, and future all at the same time. Time didn't matter in this state. So there was a whole different feeling of having a knowledge of being able to access anything. But I also knew that I lived in that body down on the table, that's my house. It's like my car or my house. And I just sort of stepped outside. But my first thought in this state was, how can I be outside my body and still be me? How does this work? Because my belief system did not support this experience at all, right? I did not believe in any of this. So here I am having this experience. I'm outside my body. And I'm still me. The way I identify with myself, that is exactly who I am outside my body. And my body is just like my car or my house. So shortly after this, I get sucked back into the body. And that next morning in the hospital, well, first of all, this nurse came to check on me, and she said, I'm sure she was aware of near-death experiences. I had never heard of anything like that. I had no idea what happened. How could I be outside my body and still be me? And she asks me, she says, did anything unusual happen in the ER yesterday? And I said, no, nothing at all. I was petrified that they were going to say, oh, she's crazy. We're going to lock her up in the psych ward. I'm never going to see my kids again. So I just kept it to myself, told my husband and my mother-in-law and people, but in the hospital, I was not going to go there in 1992. So the next morning, when I'm lying in this bed in the hospital, my sister-in-law had just passed away 10 days earlier from cancer. And I know she's in the left corner in my ceiling, and I can hear her. And she says, everything's going to be okay. I'm trying to process. I'm almost afraid of myself. Yesterday, I was outside my body. Now I think I hear my sister-in-law. What's happening? Because the belief system wasn't there. So it took me a long time to put all these different experiences that follows this experience. So then my mother-in-law was really like the person who developed me spiritually. So she came to help after my parents finally left. My parents ended up staying like 2 months. So what happened is the doctor said in the ER, I have to give you blood. And I said, you have to give me blood, because it was 1992. And people who received blood transfusions back then often ended up with AIDS. 6 years later, now they had AIDS. So the doctor said, do you have any religious beliefs that prevents you from taking blood? And I said, no, but I'm afraid of getting, AIDS in a few years. So he said, we'll see what we can do. We'll see how quickly you make blood. You were healthy going into this. I was 34 years old and a picture of health. Had just studied nutrition. I couldn't have been any healthier. So they ended up not giving me blood, though I was underneath the values where they would give blood, but because of the AIDS situation. So he said, well, you're not going to feel too good for a while, but you're making blood quickly, and we're going to send you home with these different medications and supplements. And, it'll take a couple of months, but then you'll come out of it, and then you didn't have the blood transfusion. So I pretty much slept for the first 2 months. My hands and feet were ice cold. I couldn't keep my head on a pillow because my head would pound. So finally, my mother-in-law came. She took over the helping out, and she is the one who explained to me that I'd had a near-death experience and bought me the book, Life After Life by Raymond Moody. So 6 months later, I'm just, I'm alone, and I've been sitting in a rocking chair basically for 6 months now. And we don't have medical insurance because my husband's company got bought, and he was a regional manager, and everybody was laid off from top to bottom. And he is now the sole supporter of the family. So he's just taken the first best job, even if it wasn't a regional manager, it was just a management position. He's like, well, we have money. We're in our early 30s with 3 kids. So, a tight budget. And we all got pneumonia at Christmas. So we go to the walk-in clinic because we don't have a regular doctor. And we all get antibiotics. The boys has pneumonia. We have pneumonia. Everybody had pneumonia except for the baby. And we get all the medications. Everybody heals. And after 8 days, I'm sicker than I was 8 days earlier. So I go back to the walk-in clinic. And they say, how come you're still sick? So they said, okay, we're going to do a blood test because something is not right with you, because you should be a lot better on they gave me all these meds. And they come back in and they say, do you have leukemia or AIDS? Because you have no immune system and you have to go to the ER right now. And I said, I'm not going to the ER. This is what happened to me. I didn't get a blood transfusion, but it's taken me this long to even be able to get in a car and drive here. So they said, well, you still have to go to the ER because you can die if you don't. You have no immune system. And I said, okay, well, I'll promise if I get worse, I'll go, but I'm not going to go. So they gave me all the meds, and then somehow I managed to pull myself out of that. And about 3 months later, I started bruising. And so by the time it was May, so now my daughter is 11 months old, I bump into the baby's changing table, and something that would give you a bruise the size of a nickel, I had a bruise that spanned my entire hip area that was purple and red. And it was, I was also now getting pneumonia. And it's May in Huntington Beach, California. You don't get pneumonia in May unless there's some kind of an underlying condition, right? So now I'm well enough to put my children in the car and drive myself to the doctor. So I get to this doctor, and we're getting medical insurance July 1st, and it's mid-May. And he starts listening to my chest, and he says, oh, you have beginning pneumonia. And then he sees the bruise, and he jumps in front of me, and he thinks my husband is beating me. And I tell him, no, nobody is beating me. I bumped into the baby's changing table. He doesn't believe me. He looks at all my kids. He lifts the t-shirt on my boys, who are now 7, 4.5, and my daughter's almost 1. And I said, look, I'm telling you the truth. Nobody is being hurt. This is what's happened. So again, he said, you have to do the lab test. Something is very wrong. And I said, I know something is very wrong. My father was a doctor. I get it. Something is wrong with the blood. But I'm not going to go because I'm better now than I have been all year. I put my 3 kids in the car and I drove myself here and I walked in to this building by myself. So I'm actually getting better, even though it's still bad. And we're getting insurance in July. And if I do a blood test now, it's going to be a pre-existing condition. I'm never going to get the insurance. Our wonderful medical system that has all these little clauses. So again, all this medication came out of that one again. So for the next year or two, this was just my existence. I didn't have enough blood in my body. I bruised easily. I couldn't put my knee on the floor without getting a bruise, helping my kids tie their shoes. So, and just getting dizzy. I had a stool in the kitchen so I could sit down while I was cooking for the kids because I couldn't stand up long enough and I would just get too dizzy. And that was just my existence. And it was as if my soul was always leaving. So my soul was always getting pulled out of my body. And I would just constantly put my head down to get more blood flow. I would wake up in the middle of the night, take my head off the pillow because my head would be pounding. So this second near-death experience, yes, I always joke that they saved me too quickly the first time. So I didn't get the full effect. And so they had to do it again. So I have to have a second experience that sort of activates my life path. But this second experience is so different from the first one. And I wake up in the middle of the night, my head is pounding, I take my head off the pillow like I always do. And then again, it's just, and I'm just like holding on to my soul. Nope, we're not leaving. But there's no way of resisting that. So, and it happens so quickly because it's in a split second. You are inside your body, but the next second you're not. So it's just an instantaneous transfer when the soul pops out. But this time it's more like I'm just tumbling through space. It's the sensation of just tumbling through space, almost like a spaceship traveling through space in Star Wars or something. It's just dark. There's no tunnel, nothing. I'm just traveling through darkness. And I get to this space that I call the mid station because when I get to this space, it is an awareness that there's floors below me and floors above me. So it's like if you go into a skyscraper and there's 100 floors and you push the button on the 50th floor and you get off and there's floors above you and there's floors below you. You don't know what's on those floors because you're on floor 50. So it's that kind of sensation that there were like levels. And so I call it the bouncing station because I was sent back. So it's like I got there and didn't get to stay. So as I get to this place, I hear the most beautiful music. But this music, you cannot make this music on the earth plane because it is more beautiful than any music you ever heard. And I was, very musically trained as a child. I played the guitar, I play piano, I took singing lessons as a child. And you cannot make this music on this earth plane. And I sat at the synthesizer for a week trying every single sound. There is no sound that is quite that pure and clear. And I'm wondering where this beautiful music is coming from. So I look to the right and I see the little log cabin. Literally, it looks like a Swedish sauna floating in space. It's just this little cabin and there's no trees or anything around it. It's just a log cabin. So I'm like, the music must be coming from the log cabin. So I open the door, I look inside, but it's empty. So I look to the left and I see an identical mirror image of the log cabin I had just seen. And I open the door, look inside, but it's empty. So then I become aware of this growing white light that is from behind me, almost as if somebody put a spotlight on you when you're standing in a thick, dense fog, because that light sort of is everywhere. And it's not like a spotlight that shines like a spotlight. It's just the light fills everything around you. And as far as you can see, like in any direction. And as I turn around into this light, I see an outline of angels in the light, and the music is coming from the angels. But I'm completely aware of the fact that I don't believe in angels. So I'm like, I'm seeing angels, and the music is coming from the angels, but I don't believe in angels. It's just like this whole realization. But then that light, the light is so bright and so intense. But as I'm in this light, there is a knowing that this is source. I don't care what you call it. You can call it God, or you can call it whatever God you have, but it is the source. It is what we come from. We come from this light, but we carry this light within us. We are this light. We are part of this light, and we return to this unconditional loving light, when we go on to the next dimension. And as I'm in this light, and I'm hearing this unbelievably beautiful music, I become aware of what I call the two spirit guides. And the one on my right is communicating with the one that is kind of diagonally to the left of me. And he says to the other spirit guide, "What is she doing here? She can't be here. She has to go back," which is why I call it the bouncing station. And I'm saying, no, wait a second. How can this be? How can I be outside my body and still be me? It's been over 2 years now. I've been trying to figure this out. And the spirit guide on my left says, "If I told you, you wouldn't remember, but you will remember this." And then it's like all of a sudden I'm standing on the moon and I'm looking down on the earth from outer space. But around the earth is what I called the silvery, glittery fishnet. And, this is 1994, so we don't have Google yet. We cannot Google grid around the earth, right? That did not happen for me until like 2013 or 2014. So I'm seeing this silvery, glittery net around the earth. And I call it the silvery, glittery fishnet because I grew up in Sweden. And during the summers, I spent my summers on an island without any electricity or running water, not even a payphone. And my grandmother would lay nets in the ocean to catch fish for the family. And when she lifted those nets out of the ocean, they're diamond shaped. You see those little water droplets and they sort of shimmer and glitter in the morning sunlight. So I'm looking at this net around the earth, and all I can think of is it looks like a fish net, and it's kind of sparkles. And the spirit guide says, everything on earth is connected to each other, but everything on earth is connected up to this grid. And with that information, I got sent back to earth. And that is, now this was 1994, what has activated my life path. And it's literally what I do as work today. My work today is that understanding of that interconnectedness and how we are all interconnected to each other. We are interconnected with the trees, the animals, the plants, the universe, the other planets. I mean, it's all connected. We are all one in the end. So I don't know if you have a question, so I should pause for a moment.
Okay, Dr. Lotte, as a doctor and as a psychic, what are the three main reasons that people get sick?
The three main reasons people get sick. Oh, that's a good one. So the way I look at it is, number one, it's our environment that we're in. The environment that we're in, emotionally and physically, the emotional environment you're in, the energy that you're receiving from other people is, could be good energy or bad energy. But also the environment you're in. I mean, if you're spraying your grass with certain pesticides, you have a much more a high chance of getting different kinds of cancers, etc. So the environment has a big impact. And we know that from Bruce Lipton's studies of growing bone, fat, and muscle cells in different petri dishes based on the environment the petri dish is in. So we know that that has a huge effect on us and how we are also being treated as children, and are we being seen and heard? Are we being abused in some way or another? All those things are going to contribute to your well-being physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And when you're so we have the whole environment, the physical environment, the emotional environment, but then we also have, we incarnate for different things. So in this life, I know that I incarnated to be sick, to have those experiences, because I've worked with several astrologers and they tell me that first near-death experience that I had in the ER, that was to remind myself of why I'm here and why I incarnated and what I'm here to do. And the sun on that day, July 10th, 1992, was in the exact same spot it was on the day I was born. And so that experience of leaving my body then triggered in me the memory of why I came here, which is to work spiritually and to provide healing for people. That is my incarnation in this life, to do this work. But if I hadn't had that experience, which is in my astrological chart, that wouldn't have happened. I would still be this very scientific person. I would probably still have gone back to work and work as a programmer. And that would never have developed, that whole spiritual component. And when you look at, I would say, so that's one, so you incarnate to have certain experiences, because everybody has a purpose of why we're here. And we're here to learn things. Sometimes it could just be, I'm here to learn to trust in myself in this life, or I'm here to learn to love myself in this life. It could be something that's very simple. But then we also have the karma, right? So we have karmic things that happen. And again, I've been told, they look in my chart and they say, oh yeah, and then you were really sick, and then you got well when you were about 44. And I was like, yeah, how do you know that? And he goes, yeah, that's when you paid off your past life karma. So those near-death experience was to remind myself why I'm here. That's my life journey. Why I was sick. I paid off karma from being the terrible person, because we have been everything in all past lives, right? I've been the man, I've been the female, I've been the murderer, I've been the king, I've been, we've all been all these different people. I've been the person in Israel, I've been the person in Gaza, I've been the person in Mexico, I've been the person in India, right? We have all been all these people. And so for us to have all these wars around the world is just crazy, because in your next life you're going to be in that country, right? We don't know where we're going to end up, and we have to come together as one species, and we're all just one species. We're all just the humankind. So, but we're also connected to everything else. So I was going to say those are the 3 reasons why you get sick.
Okay, Dr. Lotte. I'm sorry. Again. Okay, Dr. Lotte, thank you very much for that. My next question is this. What are the 3 main things that people can do to heal themselves?
Yeah, to heal yourself. So it's a good question. So the way I look at it is, in order to create healing physically, emotionally, and spiritually, you're going to have to do that self-work. So whatever it is that you struggle with, whether it's a physical ailment, a spiritual ailment, or an emotional ailment, it came from somewhere. You either incarnated with it to learn to get over it in this life and to resolve that issue. It may actually be your incarnation. It might be why you incarnated, to have that struggle. But we're tied to our ancestors, right, via DNA. And I call it, the quantum mechanics of everything, how we're entangled with everything that is. But in order to create healing, healing can be, even if you have, you are going to die in 6 months because you have some terrible disease, you can still heal. So the people that know they're going to die, they will still say, I've healed. I'm healed and I'm ready to pass on. And they came to terms with everything. But it doesn't matter. Sometimes people can come to terms with things and they still pass away. Or they come to terms with things and they heal things emotionally and then experience a physical healing as a result. Because the emotional component and the physical component and your spiritual component is all operating as one within you. But in order to create healing, you have to do that self-work to sort of open the channels, to create the physical and emotional healing.
Okay, one more question. It's going to be similar to the first one I asked, but let me ask it anyway. Dr. Lotte, what are the 3 things people should do to avoid getting sick and stay healthy?
To avoid getting sick, I would say number 1 is to speak your truth, because we know from research, everybody who has read Gabor Mate's book, When the Body Says No, knows all the research that has taken place. So like women who get breast cancer, they got so good at it. They would give women who had breast cancer, they suspicious for that, and would show up on a mammogram. Now they got to do another test. And they would give them questionnaires that asked how they process their emotions. And they got so good at figuring out who was going to have a positive biopsy for cancer and who was going to have a negative biopsy based on how they filled out this questionnaire. Because women who don't process their emotions and they keep everything, they just stuff everything down. And they're like, I'm going to keep the peace. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to talk back to my husband. He's going to blow a fuse. And they keep putting all the emotions down. Well, a lot of those emotions end up in the breast tissue. We know this from research. And so it just, again, shows how important it is to speak your truth or find a way to, not staying in that situation. But they did a lot of research on people and people who get ALS, which is a terrible disease where you get paralyzed. And the doctors in this book, in the Gabor Mate's book, he talks about how the doctors used to joke about why is it that it's the nicest people that get this terrible disease. And again, they linked it to poor boundary structure. These are the people that never says no. The neighbor on the next street lost his fence and they're there helping repair it. And so they have poor boundary structure. They just do everything for everybody all the time. And they have no boundaries for themselves. So I think it's really important to take a look at how we process our emotions in order to stay healthy, because again, it's that self-work of processing your emotions and try to speak your truth as well as you can and learn how to communicate your feelings, because when you're stuffing things down and you have poor boundary structures, other things are going to come from that. And I work a lot with that in Ancestral Healing, where we are tied into the way we were treated as children, and then where does that come from? But it always comes from, up the line of your ancestors. And so it's really important to process all those emotions. And then, of course, the standard answer is nutrition. Think about what you put in your mouth. A lot of the food nowadays is not even, I wouldn't even call it food, because it's all chemicals. And that is going to impact you. And again, the environment, the physical environment, and your physical well-being of exercising. So those are just the traditional, take your supplements, get some exercise, and don't eat the junk food, right? So those are things that most people are aware of.
All right. Now, when you were an atheist, were you afraid of that or no? And this is the first part of my question. The second is, now, are you afraid of that?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. So I wasn't afraid of death, even when I was an atheist, because I thought you die, it's black, you're gone. And that was it. It just sort of ends. And there was nothing to be afraid of, because I didn't believe in any religions. I didn't believe, the devil is going to come take you if you don't do the right thing. I had no fears of anything like that. Now, if I had a really strong religious belief, I would probably have been afraid, because I wasn't religious. I wasn't doing the right thing. And that would have created a lot of fear in me. And then now, of course, I understand that death is just a continuation of life. It's like I'm in a car accident and my car gets totaled and I go get a new car. That's it. So when my body dies, but I step out for a moment and then I'll come back in a new model, a new body, new experience. So the life is just continuous. It doesn't end when the body dies. We're still exactly the same person.
You mean you're going to be the same Dr. Lotte on the other side? Are you going to be a different person? You said that you were, in your previous life, you were a king, you were a beggar, you were a soldier, you were a man, you were a woman. So you're going to be a different person, and you're not going to remember anything that happened with you in your previous lives.
Right. So when I come back, I will be a different person. I will have, maybe I'll come back as Japanese next time. I have no idea, but my soul is still me. So everything that I learned in this life and everything that I've learned in all my past lives, that I take with me into every
Okay.
life, right? I call it my seed bag. It's like
Okay.
I collect seeds in this life, I put it in my seed bag, and then I come back, and in my next life, I still have all the experiences, right? You know how we look at a child and we say, oh, that's an old soul. Like this child is 3 years old, and you just has the wisdom and the aura.
Yeah.
There's something about that kid that you say have an old soul.
Yeah, but we also have these hunches. Sometimes you are a kid, but you know you shouldn't jump from that bridge or you shouldn't touch the fire. We always have this intuition, and this has been brought from past lives. You know, you intuitively know that you shouldn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, right. So we have intuition as humans of staying away from things that are hot. We say, "Oh, it's hot," and our instinct pulls us back, right? It's our reptile brain. But when we're thinking of things that we carried with us from past lives, I mean, you see these, now on social media, these kids that are 3, 4 years old are playing like Mozart, right? It makes you wonder, is that just who they came as in this life to have that experience, and therefore they came in gifted like that? Or is it that they have experiences from past lives where they actually were some famous composer, and now they're back and they're having another life as a musician? We don't really know, but there is a lot of research. I think his name is Stephen Ianson, that did a lot of original research, I think back in the 1960s, on children. And I know Netflix also has, past lives, and people remember past lives of famous stories of how kids talk about their past lives and they know who they were.
Yeah, there's a famous story with Mozart. He was writing music since he was a little kid. But back then, before the internet, all these stories were not recorded like right now. And also, people have phobias. Let's say somebody is really afraid of heights and he doesn't want to get into the plane for nothing. He's going to take a boat for 45 days, but he's not going to take a plane. So I think that's connected also to a past life somehow. Maybe he was in plane crash or something, and maybe he
Right? It
just
could be past life. It could be, right? It could be that person's past life, or it could be an ancestor's past life.
yeah
Whatever the ancestor experienced, right, it's going to get passed down. So we know from Holocaust survivors that the DNA change. We can see it down in the grandchildren of Holocaust survivors and how they've changed their expression of their gene markers. And we know from those studies that whatever they survived, their epigenetics, they're going to code for a different DNA so that their offspring has a better chance of survival. So you can have somebody. So when it's ancestral, it's typically you have a fear of something, or it could be anything. You can have a disease. Ancestral healing is fascinating because it's just anything. It could be an emotional issue. It could be you have anxiety, OCD. You have problems with relationships. You have a disease. It could be almost anything. And it gets passed down from your ancestors. So you have to take a look at what happened to your ancestors that caused this to happen in you. So, for example, if your grandfather was in World War II, and the sirens went off, right? Just when I was little, the sirens would go off first Monday at 3 o'clock every month was the test signals in case there was an invasion. So everybody would run and take cover, right? So you grew up with that siren. But back then in World War II, those sirens would go off across the city. And that meant that the airplanes were coming in and they were about to get bombed. So imagine being in that war. Your grandpa's in this war and he's struggling to stay alive. And then he does stay alive. The war ends and now he has kids. Well, he has coded basically in his DNA the fear of sirens. So now the grandkids are being born. He has a son and then he has kids. And now the granddaughter has this terrible anxiety, almost gets a panic attack every time she hears a fire truck or a police car. But she has never had any experience herself. She was never in a car accident. She was never in a fire. So there's nothing in her own life experiences that ties this fear of this siren to anything she has experienced. Well, then you look at, well, who was in a war? Who had a terrifying experience with sirens? And then you can trace it back. But the interesting part is that once we understand where this fear is coming from, or why we're sick, or why things are happening in our life, once we understand it, we can heal it. Because you can't heal something unless you understand what it is, right? So the first thing when you're sick is saying, You shouldn't sit there and say, I'm not sick, I'm not sick, I'm not sick. No, say, I'm sick. I have this disease, or the doctors don't even know what it is, but I'm sick. And now I'm going to heal it, right? You have to acknowledge that it's there. You can't heal something that you haven't acknowledged. But
Yeah.
it's the same with ancestors. Once you understand it, it's like it creates that awakening moment where you can create healing for it.
Yeah, I also noticed, because I live in Eastern Europe, and I noticed that people here, and I used to live in America, so I can compare. And people were laughing and they were friendly. And here in Eastern Europe, people are gloomy. I don't know about Sweden, but here gloomy. Here, Russia, Moldova, even Bulgaria. I just been to Bulgaria a couple of weeks ago. People are gloomy, just like here. And this land, Europe, it's full of blood. There's been a lot of
Mm-hmm.
bloodshed here. So this
Mm-hmm.
is in people's DNA, this fear, and be ready
Mm-hmm.
to survive at any moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and absolutely, because I'm gonna say it's in people's DNA, right? They inherited that. You gotta be careful because all their ancestors lived through wars, but then also the current situation. So it's a combination of the environment that they're in now, but you also have that the cultural fear. This could be us next. We might get invaded. Um, yeah. I mean, I grew up with that in Europe in the 1960s, Cold War period and afraid of getting invaded, right? Sweden was a neutral country, right? But as a
I,
child, you just hear the news and you have the fear and all these sirens go off, right? The practice of that possibility of war. A lot of my friends were, World War II babies that had fled the war.
well, the government has to scare people. So you would say, okay, we're going to save you. Just vote for me. I'm going to save you. So it's got to be this fear factor all the time right there. So this is what happened
Mhm.
between Soviet Union and Europe. They always portrayed Soviet Union as a big monster that's going to come.
Yes.
So we can protect you. Just pay your
Yeah.
taxes and be obedient, and we're going to protect it. And the same thing is happening right now. But this is the tool of the politicians.
Yes, absolutely, because they rule by fear, right? We see
Yeah,
that
yeah,
here
yeah.
too. If because fearful people, it's a nervous system thing. It's a very basic nervous system thing. When we experience fear, we don't like it, and we want to get out of that feeling of feeling that fear. But the politicians know this, and that's why they guide by fear, because they want you to be fearful, because then they promise that if you vote for me, I'm gonna make sure everything is okay. You don't have to be afraid anymore, right?
Yeah.
So it's a tactic, is they're playing on your nervous system.
Yeah, that's a school. That's a special underground school for politicians to implement these fear tactics. But that's something else. But it's important we can see right now. We can see through right now because with the internet, and also there is a shift in consciousness. People are becoming more and more and more aware right now. For the last 20, 25 years, the shift of consciousness is immense, and people understand what's going on. More and more people are awake.
Yeah.
Now, Dr. Lotte, if people want to find more about you, about work you do, about your books, about your website, if you'd like to share that.
Yes. So my website is Dr. Lotte, DRLOTTE.com. So drlotte.com. And I offer a lot of different kinds of sessions. So I do work a lot with ancestral healing. I also do mediumship readings, so people who want to connect with people in the spirit world. I do messages from your spirit guides, which is a really fun session. I love that session because the first thing that happens is I sketch in 5 minutes. I sketch what I see because I see the spirit world, and so that people will, I take a picture of it and email it to the people so they can see who their main spirit guide is. Now we all have a team of spirit guides, but the one that comes in is always the main spirit guide, and it has to do about who you are in this life and what you're here to learn. And the path you're on in this life. So that's a really fun session. And then, of course, I do medical intuitive sessions because of all these experiences I've had when I just hear things. So sometimes people get on the screen and I've already gotten the diagnosis before they get on the screen, or I already know what's going on with that person. And I use my medical knowledge because sometimes I'll get a diagnosis And I say to the person, do you have this blah, blah, blah disease? And they say, I don't even know what you're talking about. And then I say, well, this is the message I got from the spirit world, and these are the symptoms. So do you have these symptoms? And they go, yeah, that's exactly what's happening. And nobody can tell me what I have, right? So sometimes it's a combination. And I know that from having studied at Arthur Findlay College, my teachers told me it's somehow going to be a combination of your medical knowledge and working with the spirit world. And that's really what happened. So I work as a medical medium or medical intuitive. To me, it's the same thing. Because I always work with the spirit world, but I also work psychically, and I feel things in my body when I work with people.